Okay, we'll get rolling here. Welcome everyone. This is the last meeting of 2017, unless I'm unaware of one. Anyway, thank you all for coming. I did move the agenda around a little bit, and we'll have Greg and Arnie a little appreciation towards the end of the meeting or at the end of the meeting. So if somebody would like to leave for a half an hour and come back, please do, and no one will be offended. It's going to be an interesting meeting though, and it'll be riveting, and I'm sure you'll all want to stay. So we'll get moving on this. First is update on Village Employee and Volunteer Appreciation Party. Both Fran and Lynn were working on this. The date for that, the appreciation party is January 26th at the Firehouse. A lot of the folks out in the audience are welcome to come. People that have been on the boards are on the boards. So please, are we sending out?
We'll send out emails, and for employees, they'll be in their paychecks. So yes.
It'll be in their paycheck, not meaning there'll be money and extra money.
Invitation will be in the paycheck, and emails will go out to them.
In lieu of the party, you'll get a small stipend.
Yes, they'll be out early in January,
What time is that on the 26th?
6 p.m.
I'm gonna move the next down a little bit to the chapter 64. The other ones will go a little quicker. We had a petition from a person on Fair Street for some signs for children at play. It was signed by a number of people. I believe there's a lot of new families, or a number of families there, and approximately 15 children. So, as you probably all know, that all the streets people go excessively fast, or even going 15's fast actually. So, if kids are playing around. So we did look into, we talked to our insurance company, and Fran did some more research. Actually, I don't think they're allowed legally by the federal government to put signs up saying, children at play, unless it's near a playground or slow children. So, or what else on that?
Yeah, the insurance company recommends not putting anything like children at play because it gives the children an impression, and their parents an impression that it's safe to play on the streets. They recommend that you look at the MUTCD, which is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is a federal manual, which I spent about an hour on today. There are no children at play signs except, as Dave said, by a playground or by a school. You can't put them. I spoke to Larry, our officer in charge, Larry Burke, today about this. He was recommending maybe putting bumps on Fair Street to slow traffic down. He said if we're at all interested, he would look into whether or not that's a good idea. He also was aware of the fact that plowing could be an issue if you put bumps in the streets. So that may not be the greatest of ideas, but there are no legal signs that say children at play unless you're near a school or a playground. So unfortunately, I don't see any way we can get around that.
Okay, so we'll send a letter back, and with a response. Would you like to put that together, like this response letter?
Sure.
You did all the research.
Thanks.
Up right it, I could've sworn there's a couple signs.
Oh, there might be signs.
Well, there, it's.
No, for children who's slow or something. I'll take a picture of it and see
Where?
what exactly.
There are
It's up on
signs, yes,
up
there
on
are
First Boulevard
signs.
Street.
There's signs, yeah, and
There are
there's also signs
signs.
on Church Street.
Yeah, and Larry said this went up by him by Eustace, but he thinks it was like for a deaf child. Those signs are legal, deaf child, sight impaired or blind person around. Those I found, and I could do more research. What I did was spend time on the website today. I could do
What
more
about those
research.
signs that people put up, drive like here, like your kids live here, or your children live there? Those,
Yeah, there's those.
They could put them up themselves and couldn't do anything about it.
Definitely.
We asked for speed bumps a few years ago, and we were told we were not allowed to have them.
Yeah, I would not be first.
Right.
Yeah, speed bumps are difficult.
Okay. Correspondence, I did receive a letter back. We sent a letter a few weeks ago or a week ago to Nelsonville. As you may or may not know, the fire protection, we've reached an impasse with the contract with Nelsonville. So we've been withholding a check, which they sent us, that had a stipulation that it was, or saying that it was for half the amount, and actually it's not for half the amount, so we didn't, from our attorney recommended not cashing that check, or else if we cashed it, we would basically say that that was half of it. So we are still negotiating that, and they agreed to meet January 10th at 7 o'clock. It's a Wednesday night. It'll be the only thing on the agenda here in the Village Hall. What's that?
It's here, I thought it was in the firehouse.
No, it's here. And it's a public meeting. We did invite the fire company or representatives from the fire company, and the Nelsonville board will be here for that. Next, we have a film request, which was new to me. Jeff, you talked to this person about that? I was gonna have, did you talk to?
I talked to him briefly, I asked him to send that email just outlining what they want to do, the size of their crew. It's gonna be one day, but it looks like their crew is kind of substantive.
Yes, it's a substantial crew.
I'll contact them tomorrow and send them a packet. So
Yeah, I
that-
told them, fees,
Yeah,
I couldn't discuss fees until I knew the size of what they were asking for, so.
right, okay, and I think with that, the mayor said that, with that size crew, we should probably have a police officer too.
Yeah, it's gonna be, from what I gather, it's gonna be all filmed indoors at Cold Spring Pizza, maybe some shots outside of Cold Spring Pizza, but the permit really needs for the trucks and the equipment that they'll have.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Talk to them tomorrow.
so to the board, if I have Lynn and Jeff work on this, tomorrow, the reason I'm saying this is because they're requesting it for January 8th, and we're not gonna have another meeting. So, if everyone would agree, under the conditions to approve this, if, all the materials that we have in our, that, for fees, and if we talk to Larry, for the police coverage on this, and they agree to that, would everyone be in favor of this? It's on a Monday, it's between 12 and 4.
What's the price?
I think it was
It'd be
$1,500.
Plus the police fees?
Plus police.
Plus the police fees, yeah. And, then they would have to work out something with, the pizza place.
Well, it's just up
Yeah,
to
that's
them,
between them and the pizza
Yeah.
place.
And what we'd have to work out is where they're gonna park, because they have
Yeah.
3 vans and,
Yeah, there are asking for some spots in front to be reserved, whether it's to park prop cars as part of the scenery, I'm not sure.
Right. Well, I think we can work with that since it's on a Monday and it's
Yeah.
that time, and then we can, we'll work with that and with Larry.
Yeah.
That's
And
what
it's-
that's kind of what the
yeah.
fee's for.
It's Kevin Klein's son who's doing that.
Ah,
He's the producer.
Right.
Production
Okay.
company's behind this.
Nice.
That's what the plan is.
Yeah, different Klein. No, there's one in another Klein,
Oh,
Jim
okay.
Klein.
I thought Kevin did
Because
the
they-
comparison too.
I'll make a motion under the conditions that all of the requirements are met, regarding fees and police protection. And that Lynn and, Jeff be working on, that we approve, this film shoot.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next is approval of Cold Spring Police Department request to purchase surveillance equipment. Larry gave us the information last minute at our last meeting. So, we have any comments on that, discussion?
Makes sense.
So the Village of Cold Spring Police Department is requesting the Village Board accept the quote from Managed Technologies for a video surveillance system. It will be installed outside of all the engines of the Village Hall and the Police Department. The quote for the system will include the equipment, all installation, network access. Quote is $5,015 minus $2,500 from a grant obtained from Senator Sue Serino. Total cost of the village is $2,515. Larry was saying that there are a lot of blind spots if the police are in their office from people approaching or coming up the stairs. They have no surveillance or whatever. So he was requesting this, and it'll also give a view of the outside of the building. So I'll make a motion to accept to approve the purchase of the video surveillance system.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of minutes, workshop minutes, Village of Cold Spring, 10/24/17. I will make a motion to accept.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Lynn?
Okay, I make a motion to approve batch number 4418 of the bills for $13,953.08.
I will second that. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll jump back now to the chapter 64 draft.
Call them in.
What's that?
You're gonna call them in, they said to call them in.
They said to call them in?
I'll text her now.
I just have one announcement or something to say.
Okay, sure.
Yes-
Fran has an announcement.
I haven't, no, I haven't. Yesterday and today, we received our CHIPS money, so we got paid $10,315.20 yesterday for our mower, and $1,806 today came in for the trailer. So the CHIPS reimbursement money came in, and we're submitting another smaller request for reimbursement for the new work on Oak Street.
That's good news.
We got money.
Sorry, there's a topic that's not on the agenda. Last week we discussed getting 3 new tulip trees,
Right,
Down at the
super
river.
trees, yeah.
and it was approved contingent upon confirming that we did not need to to go through the procurement process. And that was confirmed during the week, a series of emails from Jeff, myself, copying the Rec Commission and the Tree Advisory Board. There was an email today from Jennifer saying, this is a really good price, this is email from Bruce. So can we just tell them to go ahead and get the trees?
I thought we did.
Yeah,
I thought so too, okay.
I think Jennifer is catching up.
She's what?
I think she's catching up on emails.
Okay, I'll send an email.
Okay, the chapter 64 waiting, HDRB is actually in the other room, and I guess they wanted to be notified and will be coming in. They've gone over the chapter 64, which relates to the HDRB, and have rewritten the code or reworked it. So what they've done is sent us a draft of the changes they've made for our review before it goes to public hearing. So we are here to get board feedback. I know there is some. I have a few questions. Marie does. If anyone else does. So,
Well, I wasn't able to look at the attorney's notes on it
Right.
today. I don't have
Okay.
anything.
The attorney's notes were minimal and we didn't make the changes.
Okay,
So there's going to be.
there's more time.
There's more time. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'll start off with my comments.
Okay. Wait till these folks get settled here.
Okay. So the preamble
Hi, HDRB.
was written in 1976, and at the time, the historic district was primarily Main Street. The preamble is being left as originally written in 1976, and it seems to me that the preamble should either be modified or it should state that this is a preamble from 41 years ago. Because it leads one to believe from the preamble that this is Main Street only, primarily Main Street, and that is not the current case, current situation. So that's, a comment. My system is running very slow. There is a comment in the document that says that it is not the intent to diminish the size.
Do we have a page or numbers?
I can't scroll back. It's item number L. Keep going. Pretty far in. As soon as
L.
L, yeah. As soon as I regain control.
What section are you looking at now?
I can't, Kathleen, my system is running very, very slow. I'll leave that alone for the time being. Let me just go through here. So, in the preamble, back to the preamble, I believe that the last sentence should be, and thereby established. Accordingly, the mayor and board of trustees in 1976 thereby created, as opposed to present tense, and hereby establish, or is it, and hereby establish, and thereby established, I think is the correct, wording. If I go on to the, beyond that, the findings and enabling authority, it says that the, so findings and enabling authority, the Board of Trustees finds that there exists within the village places like blah, 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 to contribute to the aesthetic value of the village and to promote the general good, welfare, health, and safety. I'm not sure that chapter 64 promotes those, criteria, those effects. General good, okay. The welfare, I'm not sure. The health, I'm not sure. And the safety, I'm not sure. So I
That's
recommend
model
that we
ordinance language, which
rethink
is-
that.
Sorry.
It's model
It's model
ordinance
ordinance
language and
language.
it's also,
I'm sorry, this is a discussion of the board.
Oh, I thought you wanted us to come in, I'm sorry, I didn't
Uh,
know what I'm not
certainly
exactly sure what we're
To
doing.
hear what we have to say.
Oh, okay.
Being the mayor, I would like your input, so
Well, they can give their input.
they can
after
give
we-
their input when I let them, or when the board seems. Does anyone else have a problem with them interjecting, as long as it doesn't get into a long discussion as we go along here? I would like to establish that, so, go ahead.
They're interjecting.
Yes, they can, well, if they, you know,
The question
raise
is
their
asked
hands or
for
do
me,
it
so-
politely, I would
Yes.
appreciate not just yelling out, but,
I'm waiting for.
I mean, we won't get into discussion with them. If you wanna make a statement, a quick clarification of something, like you just did, I
So
think
public-
that's fine.
Public policy. The purpose of this local law is to promote blah, 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 blah. Originally, one of the policy goals was to improve and enhance property values within the district. That's not here any longer. I think it should be an objective of the district. Let's see.
All these recommendations we'll put down and send to you guys.
Okay.
I'm sorry, my system is being very ornery. Come on. Back up. Let me shut down here. Get me back up for me. So let me just say that I have a real problem in understanding how the financial, is it financial hardship, will be evaluated. There's a lot of get this data and get that data and get that data. And I went through it all, and I got all the data, but I don't know what happens next, to an application. So I really am looking for a more objective determination of how all of the financial data will be evaluated to render an opinion as to whether or not there is a financial hardship.
This is 64-17, page 6427.
I wish I could get there.
Like, on that, I also had well, I understand that, you know, that whole section, but, you know, could you argue that, you know, the major renovation, would alter the profitable returns for a period of time based on the investment someone puts into it? And also, how would the HDRB weigh the cost of a demo, removal, or relocation, plus costs of proposed rebuild, versus the reason for denial? So if you're gonna deny someone and then their argument's going to be, you know, that they can, that they, you know, because of economic hardship, thing is, I wouldn't know how you'd weigh that, you know, as a board. If someone's gonna be investing,
ways,
say
because
they
it's
wanna
gonna
invest
demo.
X amount of dollars, but, and that's gonna be a hardship for them, so then they would like to rebuild, then they have the money to rebuild, to reinvest, to enlarge, to do whatever that they wanna do, so I would think as a board, that's gonna be very hard to determine, you know, an economic hardship under that case. I guess it would be mostly under number one under that.
And I've gone through the criteria and I don't see how I would be looking for algorithms or mathematics that leads me to this conclusion or that conclusion. And I wasn't able to reach any conclusion. And I would think that if this is the code, we would be looking for something much more concrete or specific. If this column of numbers is larger than that column of numbers, then economic hardship has been proven or economic hardship has not been proven. Under public policy number 3, it says to ensure the harmonious, orderly, and efficient growth and development of the village. I believe it should say the district, not the village. Number 4 is to enhance the visual character of the village. And again, I think it should be talking about the district and not the village. So this is numbers 3 and 4 under public policy.
Do you have a comment while we're looking for this?
Practically, the board does not take this on itself to determine the economic hardship. Practically, as in a zoning matter, or any other matter that might come up to the zoning board of appeals or the planning board, the HDRB would have to hire a consultant to do that, a financial consultant. And just as an appraiser might look at various means of evaluating a building, whether it's a stream of income approach, a cost of replacement, or a comparable sales approach, those things are factored in, and that entity would advise the HDRB, and the HDRB would then take that into consideration in such a thing. The HDRB itself would not do the number crunching.
In the same way that you work with structural consultants and engineers on seeker reviews when demolition is proposed, right? We're not structural engineers.
So I think what to Marie's point, I agree that it should be
spelled out more
clear,
clearly.
spelled out,
Yep,
yes.
got it.
But even,
how it's going.
so, what is it that there's all of this data that is identified as being elements into the calculation. And it would seem to me that there should be some statement that says that if this is less than that, then the answer is this. Or if that is less than this, then the answer is that. There's absolutely no indication of what is going to cause a positive or a negative indication of financial hardship.
Because it's not the same in every case. And
Why is that?
It's not like a one-size-fits-all
Why
issue.
isn't financial hardship the same in every case?
Because every case is different.
I'm sorry?
Because every case is different.
But you
Because
should
if
be
you-
able
if
to
you-
identify an algorithm or a methodology that can be applied to get to that point. It
But
should not
there are
be.
standard methodologies that are used by, for example, real estate appraisers or financial advisors
Mhm.
to determine, what is a reasonable return on something. If you're talking about an industrial property versus commercial property versus institutional property versus a residential property versus a mixed income property, you're talking about a whole bunch of different scenarios. So you can't talk about one algorithm or one equation that would fit all
But you
circumstances.
could talk about the algorithm that is used to conclude reasonable rate of return on industrial property, which is accepted probably by the
And it changes over
United,
time.
the United States Association of Accountants. And you should be able to talk about the same for residential property or commercial property.
But
So,
it changes over time,
what changes over time?
whatever that reasonable return is.
I agree that the number that comes out of the meat grinder is different every time, but the way you get to that number should be the same every time for this, for a class of properties, whether it be industrial or commercial or retail or residential.
If it talked about a standard used by a nationally recognized board, for example,
Mhm.
would that meet your, criteria?
If rate of return is part of the criteria in the economic hardship determination section. Yeah, I don't remember seeing rate of return in there. But if it is in there, I don't remember seeing it, Carol. It may be in there,
I think it is,
but, so what you said is that there are different ways of calculating rate of return based upon different categories of properties. And I accept that. If rate of return is one of the criteria, I'm fine with that. And then how does rate of return factor into the determination of the presence of financial hardship or the absence of financial hardship?
compare the two.
I'm sorry?
You compare the two.
What two?
You compare the rate of return that is currently available on the property versus the rate of return that would be available otherwise.
As long as you're comparing apples and oranges, I agree.
Apples
So-
and apples.
Yes. I'm hungry. So if we were comparing a building that is 20 by 20 today on a property that is 100 by 75, and tomorrow the recommendation is for a property that's 40 by 50, then the rate of return is going to be different. So the rate of return has to be in apples and apples, and the same size apples. So if what we have today is a building that is 20 by 20 on a piece of property that would permit a larger building, and the applicant wishes to build a larger building on that property, that's not apples and apples.
No, it's not.
The rate of return would theoretically be significantly higher on a larger footprint building.
In which case, there would never be a case for a demolition or a removal of the property in that scenario.
Someone could come to you and say, I wanna demolish, it's economic hardship, and you would then say, I'm sorry, your case that you want us to evaluate is comparing unlike sized buildings. And so we are unwilling to do that. Your 20 by 20 foot building now has to be compared to a 20 by 20 foot building in the future.
But return on investment is not the only indicator that is enumerated in the number of issues that we put forward.
Agreed. There are,
There's resale value, there's a whole bunch of other things.
rental for the past 3 years, appraisals for the past 4 years, something for the past 2 years, all of which, so for example, if I'm looking at rental income for the past 2 years, and this was something that I had mentioned before, we have a lot of unusual occurrences in the village. I could have a building where I am renting the second floor, and I personally am using the first floor. No rent is being generated on the first floor. My choice. So the rental income from the property currently is just the rental income for the second floor. The first floor is generating no income. So the income produced by that structure is probably 50% of what it could be. So looking at rent for the past 2 years could be misleading based upon the circumstances of the current building.
But that's only one input.
I agree it's only one input, but I can fudge.
That's only one input, and because in a unusual situation like that, and maybe not so unusual, you would also be looking at what would that non-rent producing unit produce, were it rent producing? And that's one thing that an appraiser would look at in that case.
But it's something that I believe that you're asking that the applicant produce, as opposed to having a qualified appraiser go around the village and determine what the square foot rental capability is for commercial.
Because that one indicator is not the only thing that would be a factor. It would be, the past history of the building would be one thing. The future potential of the building as is would be another, you know, and then the future potential as proposed would be a third. So that there would try to be an apples to apples comparison that's being made.
Can we come out of the weeds for one quick second in a way that may be helpful?
I
It
love
is weedsy,
weeds.
it's weedsy, but
I
it's
love
helpful.
weed, how's that? Everybody hear that?
Quote it.
Write it down.
In the same way, what I think I just heard you say, maybe at the core of your concern, which is that the applicant is asked to produce these things. In the same way that when an applicant is completing the seeker process, we take information from the applicant. There may be places, you might have an entirely honest applicant who answers everything honestly and openly, right? You might have an applicant who wants a particular outcome, so skews information a certain way. We don't just take what the applicant says and not double check it, right? So yes, there would be a point at which the information collected by the data prepared by the applicant would be reviewed with the consultant in the same way that you bring on someone who knows environmental engineering, you bring on someone who knows financing, who knows real estate appraisal, who knows rental income, these sorts of things.
So I think what I will recommend to you is that you go through a sample. Choose a property in the village and go through what the economic hardship calculations would be if the owner of the building decided that they wanted to demolish and build another apple on that site. To see whether or not the calculations do in fact work and lead you to a conclusion that it is an economic hardship or it's not an economic hardship. I think that would certainly be very illuminating to me.
It may be too, just to throw this out for thought, you know, we pulled a lot of this language because it wasn't in the code before. We pulled a lot of this language from the New York State model code. And I'm gonna guess that the reason that I'm not guessing, I'm saying something in an informed way, that the model code is not specific to the level of detail you're talking about because there are so many variables, and often in preservation, you don't have, it's not the same as having an apartment building, right? You might not necessarily have the same body of comparables, et cetera. So to lay out that level of detail in an ordinance may not be the way to go. I think it's something we need to look at. Why is the model ordinance set up in the way it is, and why aren't there algorithms and calculations? So yes, I think the exercise you're recommending would be very illuminating and helpful, but also, why is the model ordinance the way it is, and why doesn't it go down the path that you're recommending? Because I'm betting there's good legal basis for that.
Okay.
Well,
We asked
just to
Cheryl.
correct one thing, the current code does in fact have a.
Yes, not to the same level of detail, I'm
Right,
sorry,
and,
yeah.
and all we did is we took the most current language that was the SHPO in their model code sent down and we incorporated. So, I think that they certainly have a lot more experience in the process than we do. And, I have some level of confidence that, the language that they were proposing does in fact work. I mean, ultimately, the whole point is to demonstrate, if an applicant says that he has an economic hardship, it's not a question of the hardship for the particular person or the applicant, it's a hardship on the building. It's to demonstrate that the building in and of itself is really sort of either beyond repair, and so on, that it just economically does not make sense to try
That
and-
no one can make a reasonable
Right.
return on the structure, not just George, that no one can make a reasonable return.
Right.
Okay. In, number 8, under policy and practices, purpose and public policy, number 8 is to conserve valuable material and energy resources by promoting and encouraging the ongoing use and maintenance of the existing built environment. That was never an original objective. Is this something new? And if so, why?
And this, for the same reason that the code update committee is looking at the same questions that as you're being asked to look at by NYSERDA, right? Looking at energy efficiency and understanding that the most sustainable building is a building that's already built, right? The least energy intensive, resource intensive is a building that's already built.
As it turns out, of the 27 topics that were identified by NYSERDA for the Code Update Committee, have to do with energy. Sorry, there's one, green building techniques.
Okay.
That's the only one out of 27 that can be.
Are you not looking at elements of sustainability in your code update?
No.
Okay. Well,
It's
this
surprising.
again,
I'm surprised as you are, but no.
well, we think it's a good idea.
Let's see. Now, in the new chapter 64, will all of the changes be identified with the indication that this was amended by resolution 2018 dash blah 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 blah
It's
blah?
up to the village attorney, I guess.
I'm sorry?
I would imagine that'd be up to the village attorney. We have not written it that way because it was cumbersome.
I know it's
Yeah.
cumbersome, and if I go through all of the changes there, so,
I think our assumption, and it's a question for John Hurst.
First.
first,
The original attorney who worked with us on this had the other letter, is that because it is an entirely new update, that would be the document that replaces all the previous, and there is on the first page, just as there is now, as part of that paragraph, that's addressed in that first paragraph.
well, the first paragraph addresses the fact that it was added in 1976, and then it goes on to identify changes that occurred, and I thought that each change was highlighted in the text. And that's really the question that I'm asking. Will each change be highlighted in the text?
It's gonna be a document full of parentheses,
I know.
so I
Mhm.
guess you have to ask it whether it's
Yes.
readable.
Yeah, it does need to be noted. Now, does every sentence have to have that parentheses? No, but every section where there is a change needs to be noted, so.
So how that's done, we didn't know how that's done, so we, for the sake of editing capacity, we didn't do that in this draft, but we assumed that was something that the village attorney would look at when you finally sent this to him, to make sure that it complies with all the things it's supposed to comply with.
Okay, in B, alteration, it says any act or process other than preventive maintenance that changes the exterior appearance of significant historical or architectural features. Or the historic, okay, so the question is, what's the difference between, significant historical, and architectural features, and the sentence goes on to say, or the historic context of a designated landmark. So the question is, what is the historic context of a designated landmark? Also in that paragraph, also in that first sentence, there's an indication that it says erection, demolition, reconstruction, or removal of the building or structure, subdivision or merger of lots, or grading. When did grading become a criteria of the historic district? this one was a new.
This is the point, that's why we're doing an update, is that
But
all of
why
these
would,
things are.
why would grading,
Well, for
have-
example, I mean, I'm not sure how we're gonna manage this evening going forward, cause we're going letter by letter, and do we need to have maybe a separate session with you, so we don't hold everybody up?
okay,
But one of the places where grading, this is an example that I can think of right now as we're sitting here, is the grade changes at Butterfield, right? That the slope changes at Butterfield. Is that something that you want to consider? Well, if it's, okay, a better example. Say someone, St. Mary's sold the lot, sold the lawn,
mhm.
which it can do. And given the
So
zoning.
they can sell it, and then they would have to subdivide it.
Okay, Marie, so they subdivide it, and the person subdivides it and decides they wanna put several structures there, but to do that, they need to make a massive change to the grade. I'm just throwing this out as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So a question in that situation may be, is the slope of that hill,
Mhm.
for any reason, a character defining feature of that portion of the village, and would modifying that slope have a detrimental impact on that portion of the district, on that property? I don't know, that's a question to ask.
I would think that question would go to the planning board, who would be responsible for
But if
evaluating.
it's a context question and a character question, we're considering it as well.
We directed 236 Main Street across from
Mhm.
Town Hall when that was being built. They wanted to have a walkout basement through the back, which would have made the height of the front door off of the front lawn a really strange, kind of extra high
Right.
situation. And so our suggestion to mitigate it was adjusting the grade of the site overall so that from the street, it seemed more in line with the other buildings up
So
and
you-
down Main Street, so that
The slope would be maintained.
they could keep the same height of the basement, they could hit the same depth in the rear, but from the building
Right.
looked like it was like sitting up on this plinth. So that's like a really
Okay.
individual building example of grading.
I think grading is a stretch. Just one other comment, and then I'll stop, because I know you have other things you wanna do tonight. The evaluation, obviously, the evaluation of economic hardship was, obviously a very big problem to me. Let's see, I think it's L, no? Duties and powers. Where did it, I pointed it out to you.
I don't know which one you meant.
The one about, expanding. Yes. There it is. 64L on page 6416. Designation of historic landmark and modifications of the boundaries of the district may be amended in the same manner in which they were created. It is not the intent, here's my problem, it is not the intent to reduce the size of the existing district, but to enlarge and enhance it. That has never been the intent of the district. The comprehensive plan had a public meeting on that topic. The number of people who attended were vehemently opposed to any extension of the district. And what was being proposed was an extension to include Mountain Avenue and the lower portions of Parrott Street and Parsonage Street, I believe. There was not one person there who was in favor of extending to any of those streets. So the statement in the village code that it is the intent to enlarge and enhance the district, I don't see that's what we should be saying. My
Okay.
personal opinion.
That particular language, I do remember, that is carried over from the existing ordinance.
Okay,
And,
it shouldn't be there.
and it was added, it was added when we were changing something, I forget, there were some minor changes, and it was something which the head of the planning board at that time suggested that we put in.
Okay.
Also, so,
But the comprehensive plan had a workshop. It was at the VFW hall. It was on a Saturday.
I remember it, I was there actually.
Okay.
What time did it start?
Probably 8:30.
Just wanted for the record.
2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, it was
so
2
Marie-
o'clock, Kathleen.
Again, it's a concept question that you can debate. It's not new language. The general theory in preservation is that you're never looking to reduce the boundaries of a district. You're never going to deaccession buildings from an historic district. That's not the goal. The goal is to protect the boundaries that you have and, as appropriate, expand them. Now, that doesn't mean that because at one public session, no one was happy with an expansion, that you don't still have the same goal. So, all right, anyone can nominate any structure in the district, right? And can come forward and say, village, this is really important to me. I think X block X street between these two, whatever. This portion should be added to the district. In theory, from a preservation perspective, you say, that's a good thing to expand our historic resources and all of the things that our goals are. When it goes to public hearing, the public either has the opportunity to either say, excellent, let's expand the district, or the public, as in the scenario you described, has the opportunity to say, no way. That's how it works.
Is the word intent the word that's the problem here? It's the intent of the HDRB to enlarge the district.
I mean, that comes out of the model ordinance. If you
Right.
think there's something better, propose something.
Understand what you're saying. It's like, as a preservation board, you'd like to see it extended or something, but is that the intent? The way this is written, you would think that,
That's
like,
the village.
every year you get together and how are we gonna expand it? That's the
Well,
intent.
let
I
me
mean,
ask you a
that's-
question then. I mean, just remember, we can't expand the historic district, only you can.
We can nominate, we can recommend to you, but it is the trustees who make that decision. Because it is a change in the local law if you change the boundaries of the district.
One last thing, and you've heard this from me, I think 30 years is too young.
Noted.
Agreed.
Noted.
Agreed.
And I agree.
It's a split, there are differences, opinions on the board. Ultimately, you have to decide, and ultimately, the public has to decide and comment.
Well, the historical value of a McMansion or something is gonna be a little hard for some
You're
people
the
as
best to
well.
articulate in this.
Well, sure, you could say something blasphemous like that, but also I think that it is becoming more common in the preservation community to look at a 30-year mark for preserving buildings. Because it is, although not everyone on our board agrees,
Not everybody
it is often the point at which a prevailing trend becomes less popular. And as we've learned throughout the 20th century, there were lots of prevailing trends that became unpopular, which now are coveted. So it is a recommendation, it's not a demand, but it is the view of the board collectively, if not individually, that 30 years is a great direction to move in.
The counter argument is that the whole point of historic properties are properties that have stood the test of time. And I think 30 years is not enough time to classify a building as being historic, because that's still awfully young. I mean,
But a counter argument to that counter argument is that the purview of the board is not specifically history in the chronological sense, but is also examples of engineering and aesthetic criteria, and there are lots of other elements, cultural and societal elements, that go into the significance of a site or a building or a resource.
right, and counter.
Last
The
last
comment-
argument.
The last comment
Give you
is
the
that
last say on this.
30 years or 50 years is not an absolute veto. That is the sort of the guideline And if there is something younger than 50 years and you feel that it really justifies being made a landmark, you can do that. And so I think that I would rather go with the more conservative approach. And then if we have special examples that are younger than that, then those are looked at individually.
One last comment. You may think that from my comments that I don't like what we've done. We've done a marvelous job, absolutely marvelous job. So my compliments to all of you. I do have a few things that I don't like about it, but you've taken the chapter and just moved it so far ahead in a very positive fashion. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Marie, we felt beaten about the head and shoulders.
I have on page 6418, it's 64-9, public notice requirement. It says for a regular meeting, you need 7 days. I don't think that's true. And there's a 64-9, public notice requirements, page 64.
I'm off now because I was tapping things as Marie was talking. Okay. That we actually had an exchange with John first about that.
But I think if it's not a public hearing, I don't think you
No,
have to.
this is for regular
Right.
business meetings. Public hearings are addressed in their own
No,
section.
Right, I understand that, that's why I'm saying 7 days I don't think is required by OML law.
So John's view on that, I have to go back and look at his note in particular, was that, it can be I have to remember this, because we had a whole back and forth about it, about what was reasonable for
Well,
regular
if you just
business.
look into that, if that's law or whatever, it just seems like that's, it's putting you out or giving you less time to actually have a
Well,
meeting.
Well, his-
Actual
here's
regular
the-
meetings don't have to be advertised, though.
Right,
Here's the reason that we looked at it that way. Our meetings are on Wednesday night. PCNR comes out Wednesdays. And so if you were to have a public notice, it would have to be a week ahead of time.
But his.
Because then the PCNR, I mean,
but I don't think the newspapers, you don't have to have it publicized in a newspaper, it could be on the bulletin board out here and we
On the
notify.
website.
Right,
But
exactly.
notify
Let me
me.
go back, I can't remember, at this point,
Yeah.
we're moving on to the design standards at this point, and we worked on this for 2 years, so I can't remember all of the detail, but there was a reason that 7 was selected, and I can find that reason and send it to you, so you know why
It just
you
seemed to
picked
me that kind of.
Yeah, there was a reason, and I don't remember.
Gives you less time, or,
Yeah.
if you wanted to have a meeting, whatever, that's just it. On 6422, this is my last, I just wasn't clear after I read that, when I read it the first time, because it says completed application, and when I was reading it and read through it the first time, it sounded like, I took it as, before I talked to Jeff when we went over it, that a completed application to me would be, they would give the completed application to Jeff, the original one, not the completed application to the HDRB. So I think it should be clear in there that it's a completed application to the HDRB.
Yes, because Jeff doesn't determine completeness, he doesn't necessarily go through
Right.
the application.
But he goes, yeah, well, a lot of times, I mean, kind of now he's looking to make sure it's a complete application.
Well, but
To the building inspector to get it there. It's not his,
Right, but so for example, a sign, someone may have, what looks to be complete to Jeff, may have left off how something's being attached to the building, which is
right,
something
but
we
the
look at.
application's going to go to the building inspector first, and that would be the complete application if he's gonna review it, or he'd reject it.
For the building permit.
Yes,
right.
that's what I'm saying.
Yep,
It's
I got
not
it, I got
clear
it.
in there.
Yep, I got it,
Specific to that,
I got it.
Okay,
that was easy.
okay, I think we should, would you guys like to get together and just have, I mean, I kind of screwed up this whole night because, I wanted to recognize some people. It's the end of the year, and obviously there's some things that, could go on, and I think that back and forth input's definitely valuable. Instead of us, discussing this, and a few of us haven't read it or had time to read it. So I think if we get together, if you want to get together again, we can go over line by line, or we can send all our comments and discuss.
That would be
whatever,
much more useful.
instead of trying to
Send the
rush it, and I don't want to hold everyone up. So, thank you all. And part of my thank yous tonight is to volunteer boards and volunteer people. So that being said, I apologize to saying this is starting at 7:30 and it's at 8:30. Jeff calls me the Waffler, that's my new name, anyway. I know, it's not good. So, really, I just, since it is the Christmas season and, it is the last meeting of the year, I do want to thank all of our boards and all the people who put all their time in, because it's really, really appreciated by me. Especially when I took office, a lot of people, took off on us, and, I guess they showed their cards there and how much they care about the village. But that being said, I really value the people that stepped up, and just from just the back and forth tonight, we have really smart people working on our boards, and I feel confident in our boards, and so thank you all, the people that are here from the existing boards. Tonight I especially wanted to thank both Greg Gunner and Arnie Sari, because these guys have I forget what's the collect, how many years total we have, like 35 or something. It's a lot of time, and if you try to find people that even sign up for boards, it's amazing. I mean, they're not knocking the doors down, and these guys really stuck with it. I think Greg has the harder time, as the chair, and sticking with it. I mean, some people think it's hard. I think it's hard. I wouldn't want to be in the position. People aren't, it's not a glam position or whatever, and Greg takes it seriously, and the boards really do a good job. And not only that, as you may or may not know, Greg's going to be moving to Florida, so we also lose some valuable technical skills. He was helping us, getting the whole filming underway and getting that going, which, for a long time, people had a problem. We didn't have things filmed, and without Greg's help, that never would have happened, having the filming. So, Greg, thank you so much. It's really appreciated.
Thank you. Short word, it's, couldn't do it without your backing. Couldn't do it without the boards, the current board of Allison and Elliot and John and Aaron, who has stepped up to take my spot, and all the guys that I've worked with over the years. So it's a combined effort. We do it together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Donald for getting me started.
A second is Arnie Sari, who I asked. I think he was the remaining board member for the planning board when I took office, I think. And believe me, I was, before I took office, and I was involved in the board meetings and listening to Arnie, and Arnie's a very smart guy, as you all know, and came from a place that actually he had a reason for being on the board, with his architectural background and had experience in it, and Arnie, unlike myself, I don't know, he's low-key, he keeps his emotions to himself. Maybe he goes home and rips the house up. I'm not sure what, but always made his statements clear. Didn't just rubber stamp stuff. That he was doing his homework. He was, looking at everything and all the applications and coming up, and not being someone that wanted to stop progress. But there were concerns that he saw, and he made them known. And in a very diplomatic way, which I appreciate more and more. And Arnie's been with us. Him and his wife made some team, and the Village of Cold Spring is incredibly lucky to have people like Arnie and all of you, actually. So, Arnie, I hope you're enjoying your times in Vermont, and I can't thank you enough for staying with me. I asked, Arnie stuck with it as a few other people did when they could have easily just. I mean, they were there for such a long time anyway. They had reason to just drop off, just because of the amount of time. But then to ask them to stick it out for, this whole transformation or, transitional period was really remarkable. And I feel really good about that. So thank you, Arnie. We do have a couple gifts from you. This is from the board. That, we chipped in, and so a couple for you. We do have some sodas outside, and we have cookies, and that's why I kind of moved it to the end. I didn't want to just, say thank you, and then let's talk about, the chapters before. So everything's welcome. I'll bring you some sodas or some cookies if you want to hang out and talk a bit. I'd appreciate that. And again, thank you all, and have a Merry Christmas.
Yes.
And I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second. All in favor?
Aye.